When Officer Jake Reynolds pulled onto Highway 441's rain-slicked shoulder that September night, he expected another deer carcass. What his flashlight found instead made his hand freeze on his radio. A German shepherd lay crumpled against the guardrail, ribs pressing through matted fur like piano keys. But she wasn't dead. Her eyes, those deep brown eyes, tracked his movement with a terror he'd seen only once before in the face of an abused child. She was pregnant, starving. And someone had carved her up like she was nothing. 6 weeks later, this dying dog would expose a secret that had been hiding in their small Tennessee town for 3 years, a darkness that would tear their community apart before it could heal. But first, she had to survive the night, and what came next would test everyone's faith in what one life is truly worth. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Oak Ridge, Tennessee wasn't the kind of place where terrible things happened. With a population barely cracking 3,000, it was the kind of town where everybody knew everybody's business, or so they thought. The old textile mill had closed 5 years back, leaving Main Street with more empty storefronts than open ones, but the people who stayed were the stubborn kind. The kind who believed in church on Sunday, helping your neighbor, and looking out for your own. Sarah Mitchell had been looking out for strays since she could walk. At 28, she worked as a veterinary technician at Oak Ridge Animal Clinic, living in the small apartment above her parents' garage, because vet techs didn't make enough to afford much else. Her auburn hair was always pulled back in a messy bun, her scrubs perpetually wrinkled, and her eyes carried a tiredness that had nothing to do with long shifts. Every morning, Sarah filled a dog bowl with fresh water. Every night, she poured it out. The bowl belonged to Max, the golden retriever she'd lost 2 years ago. She couldn't explain why she kept doing it, even to herself. Some rituals of grief don't have explanations. Her parents, Tom and Linda Mitchell, lived on a 20-acre farm at the edge of town. Tom was 62. A retired K-9 police handler with the kind of quietness that came from seeing too much. He'd lost his own partner, a German shepherd named Max, 10 years ago in the line of duty. These days, he spent most of his time restoring a 1967 Mustang in the barn, the cherry-red beauty representing every dream he'd deferred for 40 years of service. It was going to be his retirement gift to himself. Linda had taught elementary school for 35 years before retiring last spring. At 60, she was learning that retirement felt less like freedom and more like an echoing house. Her best friend Margaret had died of cancer the year before, and their only daughter showed no signs of settling down or giving them grandchildren. Linda had converted the spare bedroom into a nursery anyway, painting it soft yellow, buying a crib at an estate sale. Just in case. She never told Sarah. Dr. James Hendricks owned the Oak Ridge Animal Clinic where Sarah worked. At 47, he was a widower who'd lost his wife 20 years ago in childbirth, though their daughter had survived. He was gruff, efficient, and charged less than he should because most of his clients couldn't afford to pay more anyway. Nobody knew that he'd once watched his 5-year-old daughter nearly drown, saved only by a stranger who disappeared before he could say thank you. He'd been paying that debt forward ever since. Officer Jake Reynolds was the one who'd made the call that night. 42, divorced, with a teenage daughter he barely saw anymore, Reynolds had spent the last 15 years as an Oak Ridge sheriff's deputy, trying to forget he'd once been something more. He'd trained in the K-9 unit with some of the best handlers in the state. One of them had been a man named Marcus Brennan. Sarah's phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m., dragging her from the kind of sleep that never feels deep enough. The dispatcher's voice crackled through, "Another abandoned dog on 441. Highway patrols on scene." Sarah sat up in the darkness of her tiny apartment, exhaustion pulling at her bones. This was the 3rd abandoned dog this month. She had an early shift at the clinic. She had bills she couldn't pay. She had a kind of tiredness that sleep never fixed. She almost didn't go. "Ma'am?" The dispatcher's voice softened. "This one's different. She's hurt bad, and she's pregnant." Sarah's hand found her keys before her mind caught up. On her way out, she passed Max's water bowl still sitting in its spot by the door. She'd filled it that morning, like always. She paused, whispered to the empty room, "I won't fail again." She had no idea what those words would cost her. The drive through dark Tennessee back roads felt endless. Rain hammered her windshield, and the truck's heater only worked on one setting: scalding. Sarah's hands gripped the wheel tight enough to ache. She'd made this drive before, answering calls about animals nobody wanted. Most times she arrived too late. Most times there was nothing left to save but a memory and a moment of silence. When she finally pulled onto the shoulder behind Reynolds' patrol car, his lights were cutting red and blue streaks through the rain. He stood in the downpour, flashlight pointed toward the guardrail, and even from 20 feet away, Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders. "Reynolds?" She grabbed her catchpole and a blanket from the truck bed. "Where is she?" He didn't answer, just aimed his flashlight lower. That's when Sarah saw her. The German Shepherd was pressed against the guardrail like she was trying to melt into the metal. Her coat, soaked through, clung to a skeletal frame. Sarah could count every rib. The dog's black and tan fur was matted with mud and something darker. Blood, maybe, or just the accumulated filth of abandonment. But it was her eyes that stopped Sarah cold. Deep brown eyes that held more fear than any living thing should have to carry. And she wasn't running. That was the worst part. She was too weak to run. "Jesus Christ," Sarah breathed. "There's more." Reynolds moved his flashlight to show the ground beneath the guardrail. The dog had dug a desperate den in the mud, a hollow barely big enough for her body. She'd positioned herself over it, protective, instinctive. "She's about to give birth," Sarah said. "Out here, in the rain." She took a step closer, and the dog's lips pulled back in a warning, not aggressive, just terrified. Sarah stopped, crouched low, made herself smaller. "Hey, girl. Hey, it's okay. Nobody's gonna hurt you." The dog's ears flattened against her skull. Her whole body trembled, and not just from cold. "Sarah." Reynolds's voice was tight. "Look at her muzzle." Sarah shifted her flashlight. The beam caught a V-shaped scar across the dog's face, the tissue puckered and white with age. Not an accident. Too precise, too deliberate. As the light traced down the dog's body, Sarah saw more. Old scars crisscrossing her legs, patches where fur had never grown back, and something that made her stomach drop. The dog's collar had been on so long it had embedded itself in the fur around her neck. "Someone did this to her," Reynolds said, and his hand drifted to his service weapon like he wished the person responsible was standing there right now. "This wasn't an accident." Sarah swallowed hard. "We need to get her to the clinic. She won't let us near her. Then we wait." Sarah sat down in the mud, rain soaking through her jeans. She kept her distance, kept her voice low and steady. "We wait until she has no choice." For an hour, they waited. Reynolds called for backup that didn't come. Saturday night, and a 3-car pileup on the interstate had every available officer tied up. So it was just the two of them, sitting in the rain, watching a dying dog protect a den that held nothing but hope. At 1:13 a.m. the dog's legs buckled. She tried to stand, stumbled, tried again. Her breathing came in sharp gasps. Contractions, Sarah realized. The puppies were coming whether this dog was ready or not. And that's when the German Shepherd did something that would haunt Sarah for weeks afterward. The dog looked directly at her, not with fear this time, but with something else, something that looked like a choice being made. A mother weighing impossible options. Trust the humans or watch her puppies die in the mud. Slowly, painfully, the dog limped toward Sarah. She didn't fight when Sarah wrapped the blanket around her skeletal frame, didn't fight when Reynolds helped lift her into the truck's passenger seat. She just collapsed there, shaking, her brown eyes watching Sarah with an expression that said, "I'm trusting you. Please don't make me regret it." Sarah's hands shook as she started the engine. "Stay with me, girl. Just stay with me." She drove through those dark back roads like the devil was chasing her. And maybe he was. In the passenger seat, the dog's eyes kept closing, then forcing themselves open, fighting unconsciousness the way drowning people fight the water. "No," Sarah said sharply. "Hey, eyes open. Stay with me." The dog's tail moved once, barely a twitch. She was still fighting. When they pulled into the clinic parking lot at 2:47 a.m., Dr. Hendricks was already there, the examination room lights blazing. He took one look at the dog and his face went pale. "How long has she been like this?" "I don't know." Sarah's voice cracked. "But I don't think she has much time." Hendricks moved fast, his hands practiced and sure as he checked vitals, listened to the dog's heart, pressed gently on her distended belly. When he looked up, his expression told Sarah everything she didn't want to know. "She's in labor. She's running a fever. And she's maybe 48 hours from death. Can we save her?" "I don't know yet." He met Sarah's eyes. "But we're damn sure going to try." By morning, the full horror of what had been done to this dog became clear. Dr. Hendricks had worked through the night running tests, taking x-rays, doing everything modern veterinary medicine could do to map the damage. Sarah stayed, curled in a chair beside the examination table where the German shepherd lay sedated. Every time Sarah's eyes closed, she saw that moment on the highway. The dog choosing to trust when trust was the last thing she should have left. When Tom and Linda arrived at 7 with coffee and breakfast neither Sarah nor Hendricks would touch, the doctor's face told them everything. Her ribs were broken, multiple times, multiple places. Hendricks pulled up the x-rays on his computer screen, pointing to white lines of old fractures that had healed crooked. Her back left leg was shattered at some point, never properly set. That's why she limps. And her teeth. His voice caught. "There are marks consistent with a muzzle being strapped on tight enough to cut into the bone." "Sweet Jesus," Linda whispered. Tom said nothing. He just stared at the X-ray images with the kind of stillness that came before violence. But that's not the worst of it. Hendricks pulled up the ultrasound images. "She has a uterine infection, pyometra. It's bad. And the puppies..." The room held its breath. "There are 7 puppies. 3 are already dead. Have been for maybe a week. The toxins from the dead tissue are poisoning her system. The other 4 are still showing heartbeats, but if we don't operate soon, we'll lose all of them, including her." Sarah's coffee went cold in her hands. "How soon?" 12 hours, maybe less. "Then we operate." Sarah. Hendricks rubbed his face, suddenly looking every one of his 47 years. "The surgery will cost around $8,000. Maybe more if there are complications." And there will be complications. $8,000. Sarah's bank account had maybe $1,200 in it. She was already 3 months behind on student loan payments. Her truck needed new tires. She'd been eating ramen for dinner 4 nights a week. "I'll find the money," she heard herself say. "How?" "I don't know, but I'll find it." Tom shifted in the corner. "Sarah, honey." "She trusted me, Dad." Sarah's voice cracked. On that highway, she had every reason to die alone, and she chose to trust me instead. I won't abandon her for money. The word hung in the air. Abandon. It meant more than she was saying, and everyone in that room knew it. Hendricks looked at the dog, still sedated, her sides rising and falling with shallow breaths. "If you can raise 4,000 by tonight, I'll cover the rest." "James, you can't afford—" "Neither can you. But here we are." He met her eyes. "You've got 12 hours. I'll prep for surgery." Sarah spent the next hour creating a GoFundMe page on her phone, her thumbs flying across the cracked screen. She tried 3 different versions before settling on something simple: "Save Bella, pregnant dog abandoned to die." She didn't know where the name came from. The dog needed one, and Bella felt right, beautiful. A name for something worth saving. She uploaded photos, careful ones that showed the dog's condition without being gratuitous, wrote about finding her on the highway, about the 12-hour deadline, about the choice between life and death coming down to money. Then she posted it everywhere: Facebook, Instagram, local community pages, the Oak Ridge Community Group, the Tennessee Animal Rescue Network. She tagged every person she knew, and some she didn't. By 9 a.m., they'd raised $175. Linda had sent $50. Reynolds had sent $25. Dr. Hendricks had sent $100, even though he'd already committed to covering half. Sarah watched the number and felt despair settling in her chest like concrete. At noon, the local news ran a segment. A young reporter Sarah had gone to high school with had seen the GoFundMe and smelled a story: "Pregnant dogs race against time." It was 3 minutes of footage showing Bella sedated in the clinic, Sarah's exhausted face, and Hendricks explaining the medical emergency in terms viewers could understand. The donations started climbing. $5 from a single mother with a note: "This is my grocery money, but she needs it more." $10 from a child's piggy bank, the parent writing, "My daughter wanted to help the doggy." $500 from the CEO of a Memphis manufacturing company with no note at all. By 2 p.m., they'd reached $2,000. By 4 p.m., $4,000. Sarah couldn't breathe. She sat in the clinic's small break room, watching the number climb on her phone screen, reading the comments from strangers, praying for Bella. Who could do this to an innocent animal? This is what community means. But not all the comments were kind. Arguments broke out in the threads. Why waste $8K on a dog when children are starving? This is emotional manipulation. People donate to animals but ignore human suffering. Sarah wanted to respond, wanted to defend herself, but she didn't have time. Bella's fever was climbing. Her contractions were getting worse. The clock was ticking down, and Sarah could hear it in her head like a bomb. At 6 p.m., they hit 6,000. At 7:30, Dr. Hendricks came to find her. "We need to make the call. We prep now, or we don't prep at all." They were still 2,000 short. Sarah looked at her phone. The donations had slowed to a trickle. She'd called every person she knew. She'd shared the link a dozen times. There was nothing left to do. "We operate," she said. "Sarah, the money. I'll figure it out. I'll get a loan. I'll sell my truck. I don't care." She stood up, her whole body shaking. "You said you'd cover half? I'll cover my half even if it takes me years. But we're not letting her die because of money. We're not." Hendricks studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Operating room. 20 minutes. As Sarah turned to go prep, her phone buzzed one more time. Anonymous donation. $2,000. The note read, "I'm a veteran living in my car. I stopped fighting years ago. She reminds me why I should start again. Save her." Sarah's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the floor and sobbed into her hands while the phone screen blurred with tears. They'd done it. Against every odd, they'd actually done it. Now all they had to do was keep Bella alive. The operating room lights were too bright, the kind of surgical white that turned everything stark and unforgiving. Sarah scrubbed in beside Dr. Hendricks, her hands shaking as she pulled on gloves. Through the window she could see Tom and Linda in the waiting room, Reynolds beside them. 3 people who had no reason to care about a dog they'd met hours ago, except that caring was what good people did. Bella lay on the table, already under anesthesia. Her breathing was shallow, monitored by machines that beeped with mechanical precision. Sarah had seen dozens of surgeries in her years as a vet tech, but this felt different. This one mattered in a way that made her chest tight. "Ready?" Hendricks asked. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. The first incision released a smell that made Sarah's stomach turn. Infection, decay, death held at bay by nothing but a dog's stubborn will to survive. Hendricks worked with steady hands, opening the uterine wall, reaching for the first puppy. It was already gone, a tiny body that had never taken a breath, perfectly formed but utterly still. Hendricks placed it gently in a steel tray and reached for the second. Also dead. The third. Sarah felt tears burning behind her surgical mask. Then Hendricks pulled out the 4th puppy and it moved. A weak gasp, a tiny cry. Alive. "Warm it," Hendricks commanded, and Sarah rushed to wrap the puppy in heated blankets, clearing its airway while Hendricks reached for the 5th. Alive. 6th. Alive. 7th. Alive. 4 puppies crying in their warming box. 4 miracles pulled from the edge of extinction. Sarah wanted to laugh and sob at the same time. But Bella wasn't out of danger yet. "I've got bleeding," Hendricks said sharply. "Can't find the source." "Sarah, suction." Sarah moved fast, but the blood kept coming. Too much. Too fast. "Blood pressure dropping," Sarah called out, watching the monitors. 80/50. "I see it. 60/40. I need more time." The monitor flatlined. One long, continuous tone that Sarah had heard before but never wanted to hear again. "No!" Hendricks started cardiac massage, his hands compressing Bella's chest with rhythmic precision. "Sarah, epi, now!" Sarah's hands fumbled with the epinephrine, nearly dropped it, steadied herself, and administered the injection directly into Bella's heart. Seconds stretched into eternities. The puppies were crying in their box. The flatline kept screaming its monotone song. Hendricks didn't stop. 15 compressions. Breath. 15 compressions. Breath. "Come on," he muttered. "Come on, damn it." 30 seconds that felt like drowning, then beep, beep, beep. The heart monitor found its rhythm again, ragged, unsteady, but there. "I've got her," Hendricks said, his voice shaking. "I've got the bleeder." "Clamp!" Sarah handed him the instrument, her hands steady now that Bella's heart was beating again. Some part of her understood she could fall apart later. Right now, this dog needed her whole. 3 hours after they'd started, Hendricks closed the final suture. Bella was stable. 4 puppies were nursing from bottles in their warming box, too young to eat on their own but fighting for life with the same stubbornness their mother had shown. In the waiting room, Hendricks delivered the news to a family that looked like they'd aged years in those 3 hours. She made it. Against every odd, she made it. Linda burst into tears. Tom's face crumpled in a way Sarah had never seen. Reynolds leaned against the wall, one hand over his eyes. Sarah, still in her blood-stained scrubs, sat down hard in a chair and finally let herself shake. The next 3 days were a blur of feeding schedules, temperature checks, and holding her breath every time Bella's eyes opened. The dog was weak, disoriented, still fighting infection even with antibiotics flooding her system, but she was alive, and she was looking for her puppies. On the 3rd day, Sarah brought them to her. 4 little bundles of fur, eyes still closed, making the tiny sounds that newborns make. Bella sniffed each one carefully, methodically, like she was counting. When she reached 4, she whimpered. Some instinct told her there should be more. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "I'm so sorry." Bella licked the 4 living puppies, and Sarah watched something shift in the dog's eyes. Acceptance, maybe, or just a mother realizing these 4 needed her more than grief did. The clinic staff had named them Scout, Hope, Courage, and Freedom. Scout was the smallest, a runt with a limp in his back leg like his mother. Hope was the loudest. Courage explored everything. Freedom was the calm one, content to sleep and eat and grow. On day 5, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She was doing routine post-op checks, running a scanner over Bella's body to check for any complications when the device beeped. She ran it again, same spot, same beep, a microchip. "James," she called. "She's chipped." Dr. Hendricks came over, scanned it himself, and pulled up the registration number on his computer. The database took a moment to load. When it did, Hendricks' face went pale. Registered owner Marcus Brennan, Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Reynolds, who'd been sitting in the corner, he'd spent nearly every evening at the clinic since the rescue, stood up so fast his chair fell over. "No, that can't be right." "You know him?" Sarah asked. Reynolds looked like he might be sick. "I trained with him, police K-9 unit, maybe 15 years ago." The story came out in pieces, Reynolds pacing while he talked. Marcus Brennan had been one of the best K-9 handlers in the state. Smart, dedicated, had a German shepherd named Titan who'd saved 6 lives in the line of duty. They'd been partners, the kind of team that looked like one organism in 2 bodies. Then Marcus had been fired. Excessive force during an arrest caught on camera. The department had no choice. His wife filed for divorce a month later, took their daughter, and in an unusual move that still bothered Reynolds, the judge had granted her custody of Titan, technically department property, but the judge ruled the dog was better off away from Marcus's instability. "I saw him go downhill fast after that," Reynolds said. "Drinking, stopped returning calls. I ran into him maybe 6 months ago at the feed store. He looked rough. I asked if he was okay. He said fine." Reynolds's voice went hollow. "I believed him. Or maybe I just wanted to believe him so I didn't have to deal with it." "This isn't your fault," Sarah said. "Isn't it?" Reynolds turned to face her, and she saw guilt etched into every line of his face. "I knew something was wrong and I walked away. How many dogs suffered because I was too much of a coward to ask questions?" Tom, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. "Son, guilt doesn't change the past. It just steals the future. Question is, what do we do now?" Reynolds straightened. "I get a warrant. Check his property." "On what grounds?" Hendricks asked. "These scars, this neglect, it's evidence of animal abuse. If he did this to her," Reynolds gestured at Bella, "there might be more." The warrant took a week to secure. A week during which Bella grew stronger, the puppies grew bigger, and Sarah moved into her parents' farmhouse because she couldn't stand being away from either. Every night she slept on the floor beside Bella's pen, and every morning she woke to find the dog watching her with eyes that were starting to look less afraid and more curious. On day 14, the warrant came through. Marcus Brennan's property was 20 minutes outside Oak Ridge, down a dirt road that turned to mud after the slightest rain. The house was small, run down, with peeling paint and a sagging porch. Behind it stood a barn, large and oddly well-maintained compared to everything else. Reynolds brought 2 other deputies, an animal control officer, and, at Sarah's insistence, her. Dr. Hendricks came too. If there were animals that needed medical attention, they'd need him. Marcus wasn't home. According to neighbors, he worked second shift at a factory in the next county over. The barn was padlocked. They used bolt cutters. The smell hit them first. Ammonia, feces, rot. The animal control officer turned away and vomited into the grass. Sarah forced herself to keep walking, forced herself to look. 12 German shepherds in wire cages barely big enough for them to turn around in. Some barking frantically. Some silent, too beaten down to make noise, all showing signs of neglect. Matted fur, visible ribs, wounds left untreated. Sarah's vision tunneled. She heard someone making a wounded animal sound and realized it was coming from her own throat. The cages were numbered, not named. Number 3 was a male with a scarred face and one eye missing. Number 5 was a female with puppies nursing, the mother barely alive herself. Number 9 was young, maybe 2 years old, shaking so hard her whole cage rattled. Number 12 was old, gray-muzzled, lying in her own waste. Bella had been number 7. Tom found the records in a filing cabinet. Years of breeding logs, sales receipts, income documentation. Marcus had been running this operation for 3 years, selling puppies online for $800 to $1,500 each. Estimated 40 puppies sold. Income of around $35,000, all unreported. Sarah found Bella's cage, and something broke inside her. The chain was still attached to the wall, dried blood on the concrete floor, scratch marks where Bella had tried to dig her way out. She sat down hard, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Tom pulled her outside, held her while she sobbed. Inside, the animal control officer was scanning the oldest dog, number 12, and found something that made Reynolds go completely still. This one's chipped. Registered to Oak Ridge K9 Unit. Name, Freya. Tom's head snapped up. Freya? That was Titan's mate. The truth settled over all of them like a shroud. Marcus hadn't just bought random dogs, he'd sought out Titan's bloodline specifically. Freya was Bella's mother. This wasn't breeding for profit. This was a sick obsession with recreating what he'd lost, twisting it into something monstrous. They found Marcus at the factory. He was arrested on the production floor, his co-workers watching in confusion as he was read his rights. In the interrogation room, he was defiant at first. I fed them, gave them shelter. That's more than most strays get. Reynolds slammed photos on the table. You tortured them. I did what I had to do to survive. You think factory work pays bills? You were making $35,000 a year off these dogs. So what? They're animals. They don't have feelings like we do. Reynolds leaned across the table. You used to believe different. You used to trust your life to a German shepherd every single day. What happened to you? For the first time, Marcus's facade cracked. His face crumpled. I lost everything. My job, my family, Titan, and you people. You just watched me fall apart and did nothing. So it's our fault? I'm saying I was drowning and nobody threw me a rope. Marcus's voice went quiet. Bella looked like Titan. I thought having her would help, but every time I looked at her, I just saw what I'd lost. And I couldn't stop taking it out on her. The charges were filed. 13 counts of animal cruelty, illegal breeding operation, animal neglect. Facing a maximum of 2 years under Tennessee's weak animal protection laws. It wasn't enough. Everyone knew it wasn't enough. But it was a start. Bella came to live at Mitchell Farm while her case worked its way toward trial. The barn where Tom kept his Mustang was converted into a comfortable space for her and the puppies. Bella wouldn't go inside at first, too similar to Marcus's barn. So Tom set up a covered pen in the yard with a heated bed and plenty of room to move. Sarah took leave from the clinic, spent 18 hours a day with Bella, working on trust exercises, basic commands, just sitting quietly until the dog stopped flinching every time someone walked by. Tom recognized PTSD when he saw it. He'd lived with it for 40 years, ever since Vietnam. He approached Bella differently than Sarah did. Slower, quieter, respecting her boundaries in ways that spoke of understanding trauma from the inside. "She's not broken," he told Sarah one evening as they watched Bella sleep with the puppies curled against her. "She's just hurt. There's a difference." The community response was overwhelming. The GoFundMe had raised $8,000 for Bella's surgery. Now people wanted to help with the other 12 dogs. Donations poured in. Volunteers stepped forward to foster. Within a week, all 12 had been placed in temporary homes while they received medical care and behavioral rehabilitation. But Freya, Bella's mother, was different. She was maybe 10 years old, blind in one eye, deaf in both ears, covered in tumors that an oncologist said were inoperable. She'd spent years in that cage, longer than any of the others. She was too damaged, had suffered too long. The question nobody wanted to ask hung in the air. Was it kinder to let her go? Online, the debates raged. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. "Only 2 years for this monster? He needs help, not punishment. What about the puppies he sold? Where are they now? Why do people care more about dogs than humans?" Sarah did one interview with the local news and the clip went viral. "People ask me why I care so much about one dog. I tell them, show me you care about one thing, truly care, and I'll show you someone who can change the world." It was shared 2 million times. Bella's law started trending. A call for stronger animal protection laws in Tennessee, but Sarah barely noticed. She was too busy teaching Bella that hands could be gentle, that voices could be kind, that the world held more than just pain. On week 5, Bella ate from Sarah's hand for the first time. On week 6, she wagged her tail when Tom approached. On week 7, she played with her puppies, actually played, bouncing and gentle-mouthing the way healthy dogs do. Small victories that felt like miracles. The trial was set for week 8. The prosecutor warned them Bella would need to appear as evidence. She'd have to see Marcus again. The question was whether she could handle it, or whether facing her abuser would break something they'd spent weeks trying to heal. The courthouse in downtown Oak Ridge was built in 1923, all red brick and white columns that spoke of a time when people believed in the permanence of justice. The courtroom itself was small, wood-paneled with high windows that let in slants of morning light. It smelled like old paper and floor polish and decades of decisions that couldn't be undone. The gallery was packed. Sarah sat in the front row with Tom and Linda on either side of her. Reynolds was in uniform, sitting ramrod straight. Dr. Hendricks was there, having closed the clinic for the day. And beside Sarah, on a leash she barely needed any more, was Bella. The German Shepherd had gained weight in the past 6 weeks. She was up to 63 pounds now, her coat shiny with proper nutrition. But the limp was still there, would always be there. The scars were still visible under her fur. And when the bailiff opened the door to bring in the defendant, Bella's ears went back. Marcus Brennan shuffled in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. He looked smaller than Sarah remembered from the photos Reynolds had shown her. Smaller and older and beaten down by something that had nothing to do with jail. When his eyes found Bella, he stopped walking. The deputy behind him had to nudge him forward. Bella stood up. Sarah's hand tightened on the leash, ready for anything. Panic, aggression, terror. But Bella didn't cower, didn't growl. She just stood there, ears forward, tail level, staring at the man who had broken her in every way a living thing could be broken. 10 seconds of locked gaze that felt like 10 years. Then Bella sat, calm, dignified, like she was saying, "I see you. I know what you are, and I'm not afraid anymore." The courtroom murmured. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair, banged her gavel once. "Order." The prosecutor was a young woman named Kate Morrison, who'd driven up from Nashville specifically for this case. As she stood and began laying out the charges, 13 counts of animal cruelty, illegal breeding operation, animal neglect, operating an unlicensed business, she spoke clearly, methodically, building a case from facts and photographs and documentation. Then she called her first witness. Dr. Hendricks took the stand, was sworn in, and proceeded to describe Bella's injuries in clinical detail. The broken ribs that had healed wrong, the shattered leg never properly set, the embedded collar, the uterine infection that had killed 3 puppies and nearly killed her. In 23 years of veterinary medicine, Hendricks said, his voice steady but his hands gripping the witness box hard enough to whiten his knuckles, this is the worst case of systematic abuse I have encountered. This wasn't neglect. Neglect is passive. This was active, ongoing torture. The defense attorney, a tired-looking public defender named William Chen, tried to cross-examine, suggesting the injuries could have been older from previous owners. Hendricks shut that down with X-ray evidence and dates that lined up exactly with Marcus's ownership. Reynolds testified next about finding Bella on the highway, about the raid that discovered 12 more dogs in similar conditions, about the breeding logs that documented 3 years of operation. His voice stayed professional until Morrison asked him about Freya. "Officer Reynolds, can you tell the court about the dog registered as Freya?" Reynolds' jaw worked. Freya was a German Shepherd registered to the Oak Ridge Canine Unit. She was the mate of a police dog named Titan. When Mr. Brennan was terminated from the Canine Unit, Titan went to his ex-wife. Freya went to a breeder, Mr. Brennan apparently tracked her down years later and purchased her. And what was Freya's condition when you found her? She was blind, deaf, covered in tumors. She'd been locked in a cage in the back of the barn, away from the others. Based on the condition of that cage, she'd been there for years. We don't think anyone had touched her in at least 6 months. What happened to Freya? Reynolds' voice broke. We had her humanely euthanized. She was suffering. There was no quality of life left to save. The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of someone crying quietly in the back row. Then Morrison called Sarah. Sarah's legs felt like water as she walked to the witness stand. She was sworn in, sat down, and looked out at a room full of people waiting to hear why a 28-year-old vet tech had bankrupted herself for a dog she didn't know. "Miss Mitchell," Morrison began gently, "can you tell the court why you took on Bella's case?" Sarah took a breath. "Let it out. Let the truth come. 2 years ago, I had a golden retriever named Max. He was my best friend. He got lymphoma, cancer. The treatment was $15,000. I was drowning in student loans, working 2 jobs. I couldn't afford it." Her voice stayed steady. She'd practiced this. "So I chose to euthanize him instead." The courtroom was listening now, really listening. "Every day since, I've asked myself if I killed my dog to save money, if I valued dollars over life. When I found Bella dying on that highway, I saw a second chance, not to save her, to prove that I could put life before cost, that I could choose right when it was hard." "So this is about your guilt?" the defense attorney objected. Morrison waved him down, but Sarah answered anyway. "This is about all of us deciding what we value. Marcus Brennan valued money over life. I almost did too, but I didn't. And that's the difference between us." The defense tried to paint Marcus as a victim, PTSD from police work, depression after his divorce, financial desperation. They brought in a psychologist who explained trauma, dissociation, how a person could separate the dogs he was hurting from the dog he'd once loved. Former colleagues testified that Marcus had been a good man once, dedicated, caring. "Good men don't torture animals for 3 years, Tom muttered under his breath. Then Marcus took the stand. He'd refused to plead guilty, his attorney had said, because he wanted to explain himself, wanted people to understand. Now, under oath, he had his chance. "Why Bella?" Morrison asked. "Why her specifically?" Marcus's voice was quiet. "She was Titan's daughter. I thought having her would bring him back, the way things were before I lost everything. Instead, every time I looked at her, I saw my failure. My wife leaving, my daughter taken away, losing Titan. And his voice caught. "I took it out on her. You tortured an innocent animal because you were sad?" "Yes." The word hung in the air like something poisonous. "Do you feel remorse, Mr. Brennan?" Marcus looked at Bella for the first time since the trial started, really looked at her. "I don't know. I think I broke something inside myself. I don't feel things right anymore. I see her now, and I know what I did was wrong, but I can't feel it. Not the way I should." Then Morrison did something unexpected. "Your Honor, I'd like to approach the defendant with the victim. Let the court see how Bella reacts to him." Chen objected. The judge overruled. Sarah walked Bella toward the defense table. Every person in that courtroom held their breath. Marcus shrank back in his chair. Bella stopped 3 feet away, sat again, just looked at him with those deep brown eyes that had seen the worst of humanity and somehow survived. Marcus broke down crying. Not the quiet tears of remorse, but the ugly, gasping sobs of a man who'd been holding himself together with nothing but denial. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "God, I'm so sorry." It was the first genuine emotion anyone had seen from him. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. The verdict came back, guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 days later. The courtroom filled again, this time for victim impact statements. Sarah spoke first. "Your Honor, Bella can't speak for herself, so I'll speak for her. She's learning to trust again, to love again, to believe the world can be kind. But she'll always limp. She'll always flinch at chains. She'll always have nightmares. Marcus Brennan took years from her. He took her mother. He took 3 of her puppies. The question isn't what he deserves. It's what will prevent the next Marcus from doing this to the next Bella." Tom spoke next, standing straight in his Sunday suit. "Your Honor, I served in Vietnam. I have PTSD. I've had dark days, days where I didn't want to be here. But I never, not once, took my pain out on something helpless. My daddy used to say, 'Son, you can't control the cards you're dealt, but you sure as hell can control how you play them.' Mental illness isn't a free pass for cruelty. Plenty of us suffer and don't become monsters." Then the door opened and a young woman walked in. Early 20s, dark hair, Marcus's eyes. The courtroom stirred. Even Marcus looked shocked. Emily Brennan took the stand without being called. "I'm Marcus Brennan's daughter. I haven't spoken to my father in 8 months because I'm the one who reported him." Her voice shook but stayed strong. "I visited him last spring. I heard the dogs crying at night. I saw Bella cowering in her cage, and I said nothing for 6 months. I'm 22 years old and I'll live with that guilt forever. But I finally found courage. The same courage Bella found. Don't let him do this to anyone else." Marcus was weeping openly now, looking at his daughter like he was seeing her for the first time. The judge asked if he had any final statement. Marcus stood. "I don't expect forgiveness. From Bella, from this court, from my daughter, from anyone. I became the thing I once fought against. I can't explain it. I can't excuse it. All I can say is," his voice broke, "I hope Bella finds peace. That's more than I deserve, and more than I'll ever find." The judge removed her glasses. "Mr. Brennan, this court has heard testimony about your PTSD, your depression, your financial struggles. And while this court acknowledges those hardships, they do not excuse 3 years of systematic torture. You were entrusted with the care of animals, and you betrayed that trust in the worst way possible. Tennessee's laws are weak. This court can only sentence you to a maximum of 2 years. But understand this. What you did to these animals revealed your character, and your character is found wanting. The sentence came down. 2 years in county jail. Lifetime ban on owning animals. $50,000 in fines and restitution. Mandatory mental health treatment. 5 years probation after release. The courtroom erupted. Some people shouting that it wasn't enough. Others arguing he needed help, not punishment. The judge's gavel banging for order. Sarah just sat there, Bella's head on her knee, feeling nothing but exhausted. Outside on the courthouse steps, reporters crowded around them. Cameras flashing, questions being shouted. Sarah was about to push through when Linda touched her arm. "Say something, honey. People are listening." So Sarah stood on those courthouse steps with Bella beside her and spoke to a crowd that would become millions online. "People ask me if 2 years is justice. I don't know, but I know this. Bella's still here. She's healing. She's learning to trust again. That's the victory. The real question is what we do next. Tennessee's animal cruelty laws are weak, so we're going to change them. We're going to make sure the next Bella has better protection. We're calling it Bella's Law." She paused. "And we're going to need your help." The video was shared 2 million times in 24 hours. Bella's Law trended nationally. State legislators' phones started ringing. 1 week later, a church in Oak Ridge held a community meeting to discuss the proposed legislation. The sanctuary was packed. Farmers worried about regulations, mental health advocates concerned about stigma, animal lovers demanding justice, politicians trying to find middle ground. Sarah stood at the podium with Bella beside her. She'd been asked to speak to explain what they were trying to do. "People tell me, 'Sarah, you can't save them all.' And they're right. I can't. But I can save one, and then another, and then another. And maybe if enough of us save one, we'll have saved them all." She looked out at the crowd. Bella isn't just a dog. She's a test. A test of who we are when no one's watching. When it costs us something, when it's hard. Marcus Brennan failed that test. But we don't have to. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Compromises were hammered out. A modified bill took shape. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be better. Tom used his veteran connections to lobby conservative legislators. "This isn't liberal or conservative," he told them. "It's right or wrong." Linda organized phone banks, getting elderly volunteers to call their representatives. "We may not have money," she said, "but we have time, and we have votes." Reynolds worked the law enforcement angle, getting other canine officers to speak out about the betrayal of someone who'd once been one of them. Emily Brennan became the face of breaking generational silence, speaking at schools about finding the courage to report abuse. The bill was introduced in week 6 of Bella's recovery. It would increase penalties, require licensing for breeding operations, create an animal abuser registry, mandate mental health evaluation for offenders. The vote was scheduled for week 12. But before the resolution could come, before the bill could pass or fail, something happened that would test everything they'd built. One of Bella's puppies got sick. Hope was the smallest of the 4 surviving puppies, the one with the loudest cry and the biggest personality. At 4 weeks old, she'd been nursing well, playing with her siblings, growing stronger every day. Sarah had started to believe that the worst was behind them. She was wrong. It started with Hope refusing to nurse. Then came the lethargy, the vomiting, the diarrhea that smelled like death itself. Sarah rushed all 4 puppies to the clinic at 2 in the morning, her heart hammering against her ribs in a rhythm that felt like prayer. Dr. Hendricks ran the tests. His face told Sarah everything before his mouth did. Parvovirus. It's highly contagious, deadly in puppies this young. Likely contracted despite vaccination because Bella's immunity was so compromised. The others? We'll isolate them, monitor them. But Hope. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The next 72 hours became a blur of IV fluids, anti-nausea medication, and sleeping on the clinic floor while Hope fought a battle her tiny body wasn't equipped to win. Sarah held the puppy against her chest, feeling the rapid heartbeat slowly weaken, watching the light in those baby blue eyes grow dimmer. Bella knew something was wrong. She paced outside the isolation room, whining, scratching at the door. When Sarah tried to comfort her, Bella just stared at the closed door like she could will it to open, could will her baby to come back to her. On day 2, Linda brought food Sarah didn't eat. Tom sat beside her in silence, the way he'd sat beside dying soldiers 40 years ago. Reynolds stopped by after his shift, took one look at Hope, and had to leave. On day 3, Hope started having seizures. Dr. Hendricks pulled Sarah into his office. She's in organ failure. There's no brain activity response. She's not coming back, Sarah. Give her more time. Time won't fix this. She's suffering. We need to consider— No! The word came out sharp as broken glass. Not yet. Please, not yet. Hendricks' voice went soft. She's in pain. I can't do it again. You didn't kill Max, Hendricks said gently. You released him. There's a difference. Is there? Sarah looked at him with eyes that hadn't slept in 3 days. Because it feels exactly the same. By hour 68, Hope was barely conscious. The seizures had stopped because there was nothing left to seize. Her tiny body was shutting down one system at a time, and all the medicine and love in the world couldn't stop it. Tom came into the room, looked at the puppy, looked at his daughter. Honey, he said quietly, sometimes loving something means letting it go. Linda's hand found Sarah's shoulder. Should we let Bella say goodbye? So they brought Bella to the isolation room. The German shepherd entered slowly, sniffed the air, and went directly to the table where Hope lay with tubes and wires keeping track of a life that was already gone. Bella sniffed her puppy, whimpered, licked Hope's face the way she'd licked it every day since birth. Hope didn't respond. Bella looked at Sarah with an expression that broke every heart in that room. Fix her. You fix things. Sarah was crying too hard to speak. She just shook her head. Bella lay down beside the examination table, head on her paws, watching Hope. Making a sound Sarah had never heard before. Low, keening, ancient. The sound of a mother watching her child die. Tom had to step outside. Reynolds covered his face with both hands. Linda held Sarah while she sobbed. Dr. Hendricks prepared the injection with hands that shook. Bella, he said softly, I'm going to help her now. She won't hurt anymore. The pink liquid went into Hope's IV line. Her heart monitor slowed more, flatlined. The silence was absolute. Bella stood immediately, sniffed Hope frantically, tried to wake her with her nose. When the puppy didn't move, Bella sat back, tilted her head toward the ceiling, and howled. It was a sound that didn't belong in the modern world, a sound that came from wolves mourning their dead, from mothers throughout history losing children, from every living thing that had ever loved and lost. Long, mournful, it seemed to go on forever. Everyone in the clinic stopped what they were doing. Everyone cried. Bella wouldn't leave Hope's body. She stayed beside it for 3 hours, occasionally trying to wake her, mostly just lying there, keeping vigil. Finally, Tom gently led her away with a soft rope around her neck. Bella looked back once at the small, still form on the table, then she walked out, head down, and didn't make another sound. Back at the farm, Bella wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink, wouldn't interact with Scout, Courage, and Freedom, the 3 surviving puppies who needed their mother. She just lay in the corner of her pen, facing the wall, eyes open but seeing nothing. Day 1 of Bella's shutdown, Sarah tried everything. Hand-feeding, bringing the puppies to her, sitting with her for hours, talking, pleading, begging her not to give up. Bella never moved. Day 2, Dr. Hendricks warned them. If she doesn't eat in 24 hours, we'll have to tube feed her. But Sarah, he hesitated. I think she's given up. Sometimes grief is too heavy to carry. Day 3, at 3 in the morning, Sarah sat alone with Bella in the barn. Tom and Linda were asleep in the house. The 3 surviving puppies were curled together under a heat lamp. And Bella was still facing that wall, barely breathing, choosing death over a life that hurt too much. Sarah had nothing left, no energy to be strong, no words to be comforting, no hope to be convincing. So she just told the truth. You want to know why I couldn't let you go? Her voice was raw. Why I bankrupted myself for you? Bella didn't move. 2 years ago, my dog Max got cancer, treatable cancer. $15,000. I was drowning in debt, working 2 jobs, and I chose to euthanize him instead. The words came faster now, like poison finally leaving a wound. I told myself it was mercy, that I was ending his suffering. But he wasn't suffering yet. The cancer was early. He had time. I chose money over time. I chose my financial freedom over his life. Bella's ear twitched, the first movement in days. Every morning since, I fill his water bowl, because I couldn't be there to fill it when he needed me. I was working late the night he got sick. I chose work over him. I chose everything over him. Bella slowly turned her head. When I found you dying on that highway, I saw my chance to choose right, to prove I could value life over money. But I was wrong. Sarah's voice broke completely. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about you. You deserved to live, not because it made me feel better, but because your life has value, just like Max's did, just like Hope's did. Bella's eyes opened fully, looking at Sarah for the first time in 3 days. I'm sorry I made your survival about me. I'm sorry Hope died. I'm sorry I can't fix everything. Sarah reached out slowly. But I promise you this. You will have joy. You will have love. You will have a life worth living, even if it hurts, even if it's hard. Bella stood, walked to Sarah, placed her head in Sarah's lap. Her tail moved once. From the corner, Scout started crying. He'd been the closest to Hope, and without her he was struggling. His cries grew weaker, more desperate. Bella's head lifted, maternal instinct cutting through grief like light through darkness. She walked to Scout, sniffed him, started cleaning him. Scout quieted, began nursing. Bella moved to Courage, then Freedom, caring for all 3. Sarah watched her come back to life, one small choice at a time. Tom appeared in the doorway. She came back. She came back for them, Sarah whispered. That's what mothers do, Linda said from behind Tom. They come back. Bella ate a small amount, drank water, lay down with her 3 surviving puppies and looked at Sarah with eyes that were still sad but present. She was choosing to stay. The weeks after Hope's death changed something fundamental in all of them. Bella moved through her days with a quietness that wasn't quite depression but wasn't quite healing either. She cared for Scout, Courage, and Freedom with diligence, but the joy Sarah had started to see in her was gone. She ate because she had to. She walked because Tom led her. She existed, but she wasn't living. Sarah understood that hollowness. She wore it too. It was Emily Brennan who appeared at the farm on a Tuesday morning unannounced, driving a beat-up Honda that looked like it had seen better decades. Sarah was in the yard with Bella, trying to coax the dog into playing with a rope toy. Bella just looked at it with the kind of exhaustion that had nothing to do with being tired. Emily got out of the car slowly, like she wasn't sure she'd be welcome. She was young, maybe 22, with her father's dark eyes and something broken in her posture that made Sarah's chest ache. "I'm sorry to just show up," Emily said. "I didn't know if you'd want to see me." "Why wouldn't I?" "Because of what my father did. Because I'm his daughter. Because—" her voice cracked. "Because I knew. I knew for 6 months before I reported him." Sarah stood up. "Come inside." In the kitchen, Linda made coffee. Neither of them would drink while Emily told the full story. How she'd visited her father last spring, trying to rebuild some kind of relationship after years of estrangement. How she'd heard the dogs crying at night. How she'd asked about them and Marcus had said they were fine, just vocal. How she'd believed him because believing was easier than knowing. Then one night I went out to the barn myself. I saw Bella. She was pregnant, looked half-starved, and when she saw me, she just curled up like she was trying to disappear. I knew then, I knew exactly what he was doing. Emily's hands shook around her coffee mug. And I left. I got in my car and I left, and I didn't say anything for 6 months. But you did report him, Sarah said. Eventually, you found the courage. 6 months later. How many dogs suffered in those 6 months because I was too scared to do the right thing? Emily looked up, tears streaming down her face. Hope died because I didn't act sooner. If I'd reported him in the spring, Bella would have been rescued before she got pregnant. Hope would never have been born into suffering. She'd still be alive. The logic was flawed, and they both knew it, but guilt didn't operate on logic. "You're not responsible for your father's choices," Sarah said quietly. "Aren't I? My mom used to say he was getting worse after she left. I should have checked on him. Should have—" "No." Tom's voice cut through from the doorway. "You're doing what he did, girl, taking responsibility for things you can't control. You didn't make him torture those dogs. You didn't make him who he became. And when you finally saw the truth, you did something about it? That's what matters." Emily wiped her eyes. "I don't know how to live with it." "You live with it the way Bella's living with losing hope," Tom said, coming to sit at the table. "You get up every day and you choose to do better. You can't change the past. None of us can. But you can change what comes next." That conversation became the seed of something larger. Emily started volunteering at the farm, helping care for Bella and the puppies. She was gentle with them, patient in a way that spoke of someone trying to atone through action. And slowly, Bella began to respond to her. It was Emily who was there the day Scout took his first wobbly steps outside the barn. Emily who laughed when Courage tried to attack a butterfly 3 times his size. Emily who held Freedom when he got scared of his own shadow. And it was Emily who was there when Bella played for the first time since Hope's death, a gentle game of tug-of-war with a rope toy, her tail actually wagging. "She's going to be okay," Emily said, watching Bella with something like wonder on her face. "So are you," Sarah replied. The bill for Bella's law was scheduled for a vote in the state legislature. Tom had been lobbying hard, using every connection he'd built in 40 years of service. Linda had organized phone banks, getting retired teachers and church members to call their representatives. Reynolds worked the law enforcement angle. And Sarah became the public face, doing interviews, speaking at town halls, telling Bella's story over and over until her voice went hoarse. The opposition was fierce. Agricultural lobbyists argued it would hurt legitimate breeders. Fiscal conservatives questioned enforcement costs. Some legislators simply didn't care. To them, dogs were property, not beings worthy of protection. But momentum was building. The viral video of Sarah on the courthouse steps had been viewed over 5 million times. #Bellas. Law was trending again. Celebrities were sharing the story. And most importantly, people were calling their representatives in numbers that couldn't be ignored. 3 days before the vote, news broke about one of the other 12 dogs rescued from Marcus's barn. Number 9, the young female who'd been shaking so hard her cage rattled, had been adopted by a family in Nashville. She was thriving, training as a therapy dog for children with autism. The local news did a feature showing her working with a nonverbal 6-year-old boy. By the end of the segment, the boy had spoken his first word in months. Dog. It was exactly the kind of story that changed minds. 2 days before the vote, the Nashville newspaper ran an investigation into the 40-plus puppies Marcus had sold over 3 years. They'd tracked down 15 of them. Most were in good homes, healthy and loved, but 3 had ended up in shelters, abandoned when they grew too big or too expensive. 1 had been put down for aggression that the shelter suspected came from abuse. Another had simply disappeared, no record of what happened after the initial sale. The article ran with a headline, "The Hidden Cost of Backyard Breeding." It was shared 100,000 times. The day before the vote, Sarah stood in the state capitol building waiting to testify before the legislature. Bella was beside her, now 67 pounds, healthy, her coat shining, still limping, still scarred, but undeniably alive. Emily was there too. She'd been asked to testify, to speak about breaking the cycle of silence. She was terrified, but she'd said yes. That night Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Max, about Hope, about all the dogs who'd never gotten a second chance. She thought about Marcus in his cell, about whether punishment ever equaled justice, about whether any of this would actually change anything. At 2 in the morning, she went out to the barn where Bella slept with her 3 remaining puppies. The German Shepherd opened one eye when Sarah entered, then closed it again. Trust instead of fear, Sarah sat down beside her. "Tomorrow we find out if any of this mattered," she whispered. Bella's tail thumped once against the straw. It wasn't much, but it was enough. 3 months later, Bella stood on the porch of Mitchell Farm at 67 pounds, healthy and strong. The limp would always be there, a permanent reminder written into bone and muscle. But she ran now, actually ran, chasing butterflies across the yard with something that looked like joy. The 3 surviving puppies were ready for adoption. Scout, Courage, and Freedom had been carefully matched with families who understood what these dogs represented. Scout went to James Crawford, a 68-year-old veteran with PTSD who needed exactly what a small, limping puppy could give, a reason to stay. Courage went to Maria Santos, a domestic violence survivor learning to feel safe in her own skin again. Freedom went to Daniel Wright, a former prisoner rebuilding his life one day at a time, who started a program training shelter dogs for adoption. On adoption day, Bella sniffed each puppy goodbye. She knew they were leaving. Sarah watched the German Shepherd's tail droop slightly, but Bella didn't try to stop them. She'd learned what love sometimes required, letting go. The vote on Bella's law came down to a single session that lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the tally read 67 to 28. Passed. The new law increased penalties for animal cruelty to 5 years maximum, established breeding operation oversight, created an animal abuser registry, and mandated mental health evaluations for offenders. At the signing ceremony, the governor posed with Bella for photographs that would run in newspapers across the state. "This dog didn't just survive," he said. "She sparked a movement." 18 months after that rainy night on Highway 441, all 3 grown puppies returned to Mitchell Farm for a reunion. Bella saw Scout first, now a full-sized German Shepherd working as a service dog, and recognition was immediate. She ran to him, no limp visible in her excitement, and within seconds all 4 dogs were playing together while their families watched and wept. Sarah stood on the porch with Bella pressed against her leg, looking out at the farm bathed in golden afternoon light. Tom's arm was around Linda. Reynolds stood beside Emily, and three families who'd been strangers were now bonded by the dogs who'd saved them all. "Was it worth it?" Linda asked softly. Sarah looked down at Bella, then out at Scout helping James stand after he'd stumbled, at Courage staying close to Maria's side, at Freedom playing gentle with Daniel's young nephew. "Every single dollar," Sarah said. "Every single tear." Bella's tail wagged, strong and sure, and for the first time since that highway, Sarah understood. They hadn't saved Bella. They'd saved each other. Sometimes the greatest gift we receive isn't the one we planned for. Tom and Linda Mitchell thought their golden years would be quiet, maybe lonely, just two people in a big farmhouse with dreams of grandchildren that never came. Instead, a broken dog taught them that purpose doesn't retire when you do, that love doesn't run out just because you're running out of time, and that sometimes your legacy isn't the family you planned, but the lives you choose to touch. Bella reminded them what so many of us forget in the second half of life, that we still matter, that our choices still echo, that there's profound meaning in simply showing up for something that needs us. She proved that it's never too late to make a difference, never too late to choose courage over convenience, never too late to become exactly who we always hoped we'd be. The most beautiful part: Tom sold his retirement dream, that Mustang he'd restored for 40 years, and never once regretted it, because he discovered something better than freedom: purpose. Have you ever sacrificed something you thought you needed, only to discover something you actually needed more? What would you be willing to give up if it meant saving a life? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear what matters most to you.